Thank you for joining us for State of Texas In Depth. I'm Erin Cargile in for Josh Hinkle this morning. The Democrat who wants to become the state's top lawyer says his opponent is afraid to debate. The Attorney General is one of the most important positions in state government because he or she weighs in on just about every policy, from plastic bags to how schools are funded. Houston Attorney Sam Houston challenged State Senator Ken Paxton to debate before the November general election.
If you want to be the Attorney General in this state, be a lawyer and stand up and debate your opponent. I'll debate him anywhere, everywhere, but I want one thing clear. We don't want any rules where you get pre-approved questions. That's not a debate. That's a soundbite.
A spokesman for Ken Paxton called Houston's challenge a desperate ploy, but did not say whether Paxton would ever agree to a debate. Turning to the world of higher education and politics, this week a controversial University of Texas system regent defended his actions. Wallace Hall spoke publicly at an event hosted by our media partner, the Texas Tribune. Hall said he is confident every action he has taken as regent was appropriate. The Dallas businessman confirmed a case against him will now go before a grand jury. It involves the legality of Hall's actions in an effort to force out UT Austin President Bill Powers. A legislative panel censored Hall but stopped short of impeaching him. Hall told the Tribune's Evan Smith he won't change the way he acts even with the censor, and Powers' announcement that he would step down next year.
It seems to be this region's, and maybe not only this region's, but it seems to be this region's singular mission to make sure that President Powers is no longer President Powers as quickly as possible.
Well, it would be disingenuous for me to say that now that he has turned in his resignation, what some would call a forced resignation, and he leaves June 1st.
June 2nd, yeah.
June 2nd.
Right.
That, therefore, I think it's okay that we continue to sit in this dysfunctional environment, because I don't.
There certainly is a lot to talk about from that conversation. Joining me this morning is higher education reporter for the Texas Tribune, Reeve Hamilton. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
You have been covering this thing from the get-go, but I do want to start with another clip from that Trib Live conversation where Hall talked about the politics of the regent position.
And I've learned a lot about this. I thought I was going to be dealing with faculty issues and traditional higher ed issues when I came on the board. I didn't realize the political involvement in an inappropriate way in higher ed, certainly here in Texas, and I've seen it in other places. But the reality of it is, we had Senator Kel Seliger, who's chair of higher ed for the Senate, actually trying to make a law passed in the House to limit the board's ability to do just that, to fire the president of the University of Texas if the board so chose.
What do those comments say about the relationship between lawmakers and Regent Hall?
Well, it's not good, and it certainly hasn't been good for a while. But of course, that depends on which lawmakers you're talking about. And obviously, we're about to see a change in leadership in the legislature, which could change that. But to date, and this controversy has been going on for several years now, multiple sessions, it's been bad. Obviously, a legislative committee voted to censure Hall. And actually multiple legislative committees have been formed specifically to look into generally the University of Texas controversy, but that's all sort of centered in Wallace Hall's service on the board. So it's been a contentious last few years. And like he said, it's not clear if it will calm down or not as we head into the next session.
Yeah, how long do you think this thing will play out? I mean, you've been covering it for a good while now.
Well, Wallace Hall's on the board unless he's removed until 2017. But other members of the board are about to cycle off in February. Obviously, there's a new chancellor, Admiral McRaven, coming on as the chancellor in January, and Bill Powers, who has been the center of Hall's focus for his time on the board, which he got on in 2011, is leaving in June, like they said there. So it could leave as we have this sort of massive sea change. Also, Hall has been pretty close to Ken Paxton, who is the Republican running for Attorney General, and Dan Patrick, who is the presumptive, winner of the lieutenant governor's race. He's up against Democrat Letitia Vanderpute. But so if those two are in power and they've been friendly to Hall, Hall's been friendly to them monetarily, then that could seriously change the tone in the legislature in his favor.
Yeah, things could die down,
Yeah.
maybe a little bit. Let me ask you this. House leaders like Speaker Strauss and others in the House and Senate have a strong relationship with President Powers. What impact does that have?
It's had a serious impact, and you've seen them react strongly to perceived threats to Powers' job, and that's caused them to pass legislation restricting boards' capabilities, which was vetoed by the governor last year. But that bill could come back, especially with a new governor who might not be as inclined to veto it. So I think they'll continue to be protective of Powers as long as he's in there, and they will be very interested to the extent that they can be. Obviously, it's not up to them, but they will be keeping a close eye on who the board picks to replace Powers.
Of course, you cover higher ed for the Tribune. Moving on from the Hall issue, this week a law took effect helping veterans transition to college. What will we see happen with this?
Well, that's been an ongoing issue is getting more veterans into college, and veterans and their families can get tuition exemptions, and making sure that that is funded by the legislature. Right now it's sort of an unfunded mandate that the schools just have to eat, and there's been talk about finding a way to fund that. It's part of Abbott's higher education policy plan that he put out last week that says that we should really be fully funding this so that other students aren't bearing the costs of getting these students into college.
Yeah.
But that and a number of other issues will probably likely come up during the session. I think one of the big issues will be whether or not schools get money for new construction, which the legislature hasn't given them since 2006, and is beginning, especially on the smaller campuses that have growing student populations, beginning to be a serious problem.
Yeah, absolutely. You led into my next question, because I was going to say, what do we need to look out for? What do you think lawmakers are going to be focusing on most when it comes to higher ed in the session, but besides the two things you've already mentioned?
Well, I think it'll be interesting to see if that one bill comes back about regents and board governance. You have the buildings issue, and then beyond that, it's a matter of just, are they going to fully fund student grant programs to bring down affordability? And both Wendy Davis and Greg Abbott have said that they want to refocus on growing more Tier 1 universities, or sort of growing schools like the University of Houston and Texas Tech into top-tier public universities like University of Texas and Texas A&M. So we'll see a refocusing on that, I think.
Okay, Reeve Hamilton with the Texas Tribune. Thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you very much.
Well, voters, you have less than 2 months before you head to the polls. Now a new tool could help you make a decision about the bonds. Depending on where you live, you may be deciding on taking on millions of dollars worth of debt. For instance, Austin voters can say yes or no to $600 million for a new urban rail line. The Texas Comptroller's Office launched a website tracking every bond election in the state. You can check out the full report and inform yourself before November by visiting this story on KXAN.com. State lawmakers met at the Capitol this week to gauge where schools are at when it comes to putting more career tech programs in place. I learned Manor ISD is considering turning their old vacant administration building into a career tech hub. They have been talking with the Austin Community College to help make it happen. It would be a good spot to expand their nursing assistant certification program, according to the superintendent, and it could house many other certifications.
If we partnered with someone like ACC, they would supply the instructors, and we would be able to send our students there, and they would get certifications, and then it would be available in the evenings for adults.
The district is also in talks with Samsung and Applied Materials to come up with courses and internships that are in line with what employers are looking for. Thank you for joining us for State of Texas In Depth. Stick around for 9 o'clock for the first episode of Meet the Press with new host Chuck Todd. His interview, President Obama is with him. But first, we're coming back with more news and weather.